Thanks to its rich history, Hungary has an outstanding cultural heritage, including plenty of beautiful and important buildings that represent the development and changes of the past 2 millennia. Although several archaeological finds prove that the Carpathian Basin has been populated since the prehistoric times, the first real architectural remains are from the times of the ancient Roman Empire. As the province of Pannonia became part of the Roman Empire, the Danube served as a border between the empire and the neighboring territories. Numerous military camps were established to keep order along the river. On the territory of present-day Óbuda, the Romans founded the city of Aquincum. Remains of Roman architecture, such as the amphitheater, roads and ruins of private and public buildings are still visible in some parts of Óbuda. To protect the other side of the border, another Roman town, Contra Aquincum, was established on the territory of today's Pest, near the Elizabeth Bridge. Pécs has a long and rich history dating back to the times of the Roman Empire, when the city was called Sopiane. In connection with the history of religious architecture in the area, it is important to mention the early Christian cemetery and necropolis from the 4th century, a unique UNESCO World Heritage Site. The tombs and burial chambers represent different periods of architecture and art, and reflect changes in the local community. The walls are decorated with biblical stories and figures. Built on the ruins of the ancient Roman colony Savaria, another significant settlement along the historical Amber Road, Szombathely's history also dates back 2 millennia in time. The remaining walls and houses, as well as temples, are remnants of one of the greatest empires in human history. The archaeological park, together with the Iseum, the sanctuary of the Egyptian goddess Isis, is the most iconic landmark of the city. In Sopron too, the ruins of Roman houses and city streets are still visible in the basements of some downtown houses, and also in the archaeological park behind the city hall. The most important finds, such as gravestones, sanctuary altars, as well as the giant marmoreal statues of Jupiter, Juno and Minerva, the main deities of the ancient Romans, are preserved in the lapidarium at the main square, built upon the ruins of the old Forum of Scarbantia. Following the migration period and the reign of several empires, the Hungarian tribes occupied the territory of Hungary and later founded their medieval Christian state. Many surviving buildings of Hungary, such as churches, civic houses, castles, noble and royal palaces, remained from this period. The two most important architectural styles of the Middle Ages were Romanesque in the 6th–11th centuries, and later the Gothic styles in the 12th–16th centuries. Romanesque architecture is rooted in ancient Roman and Byzantine heritage, and its main characteristics are solidity, thickness of walls, which would also serve defensive purposes, round arches, sturdy pillars, bar vaults, large towers, decorative arcading and symmetrical layouts. However, Gothic architecture evolved from the Romanesque style. It broke up with massive walls and compact buildings, and introduced the style of grandness and advanced technology. Its primary engineering innovation and the most characteristic design component is the pointed arch, which also led to the development of the pointed rib vault and flying buttresses, combined with elaborate tracery and stained glass windows, as well as high towers striking to the altitude of God. Most of the surviving medieval buildings in Hungary preserved both Romanesque and Gothic elements. The St. George Parish Church of Jak is the most well-preserved Romanesque building in Hungary. The former Benedictine Monastery was established in 1214. The most remarkable parts of the building are the columns and statues of its portal. The ruin of the Premonstratensian Monastery church in Zsámbék has a similar appearance. It was built in the 13th century in Romanesque style as a private family church, and later on it was rebuilt in Gothic style. The royal palace and the walls of Buda Castle have a history of 800 years. Their construction dates back to the 13th century, but they were destroyed many times over the following centuries. The Matthias Church is more than 700 years old. Although it has been rebuilt several times, it preserved many original medieval elements. The Cavernous Church of Awash in Mishkodz, located on the northern side of the Awash hill, was built in Romanesque and Gothic styles too. The Benedictine Monastery and the Castle of Vichygrad lie at the foothills of the Machek Mountains. Most of the complex's architectural heritage originates from the Romanesque and Gothic times. Founded in 996 by Grand Prince Géza, the father of Saint Stephen, the Benedictine Archabbey of Pannonhalma is one of the oldest religious complexes in Hungary. The Gothic basilica and crypt, both built in the 13th century, are the oldest parts of the complex. Many of the historical churches of Sopron, such as the Gothic Goat Church and the St. Michael's Church, are notable sites in the most loyal city. There are significant examples of Jewish heritage too. Two medieval synagogues survived the centuries, giving us some insight into the colorful life of the historic Sopron. Having witnessed the 1000-year history of Hungary, there are numerous wonderful castles in the country, presenting original medieval architectural heritage. The iconic Castle of Vichygrad, together with the Lower Castle and the Solomon's Tower on the riverbank, are counted as the most important fortifications of the Kingdom of Hungary. The Castle of Eger is an important site of national identity and pride. The fortress has a history of almost a millennium. The current complex was built after the Mongol invasion, and it became the home of the bishop too. The ruins of Hollókő Castle stand on the top of a hill near the village. Built after the Mongol invasion in the 13th century, it played an important role in the defense of northern Hungary. The ruins of two medieval strongholds near Chagotarian, the Castle of Salgó and the Castle of Somoskő, are worth visiting while wandering in the hills surrounding the city. Diósgyőr Castle is mostly known for its four-tower design and for being one of the most iconic and well-known landmarks of Hungary. Standing on majestic volcanic cliffs in the Zemplén Mountains, the medieval Boldogkő Castle and Füzér Castle are probably among the most picturesque ones. Gyula's Gothic brick castle lies at the river White-Körös. The building is the only of its kind in today's Hungary still standing. Szigetvár Castle is best known for having been besieged by the Ottomans in 1566. The neighboring Castle of Siklós, which has served in many battles and wars, is one of the most well-preserved fortresses of Hungary. The magnificent castles around Lake Balaton, Sümeg, Szigliget, Csesznek are also great mementos of the glorious times of medieval Hungary. Renaissance art developed in late medieval Italy and greatly influenced European culture between the 14th and the 16th centuries. It was a revival and further development of certain elements of ancient Greco-Roman culture, since these two cultures were seen as examples of human perfection. Renaissance preferred symmetry, proportion, geometry, and the regularity of parts inspired by classical antiquity, and columns, pilasters, as well as semicircular arches and hemispherical domes were often used. The little historical town of Vichygrad once used to be a royal seat. Even in its ruins, the royal palace of King Matthias Corvinus reflects Vichygrad's Renaissance glory and rank. Its most special monuments are the marble and limestone fragments of the lions and the Hercules fountains. The Castle of Shadowspotak used to belong to the famous Rákóczi family and preserved many architectural elements from the Renaissance. Especially remarkable are the staircase and the loggia in the court of the building. The Bakóc Chapel was ordered to be built by the Archbishop of Esztergom, Tamás Bakóc. It is now part of the Cathedral of Esztergom, Hungary's largest Christian church. The chapel is the most precious artwork of the Hungarian Renaissance, and it also serves as the burial place of the Archbishop's family. Although the almost 150 years long Ottoman occupation stopped the development of European art and culture in the country, it made an impact and created its own heritage in Hungarian architecture. Many public buildings of the Turkish reign survived, such as mosques, minarets and baths. The most well-known one is most probably the minaret in Eger, the surviving 40-meter-high tower of a former mosque built in the 17th century, the northernmost of its kind. The ruins of the Valides Sultana baths and the fully refurbished, still working Turkish bath in the city park are also remarkable examples of Eger's Ottoman heritage. There is one another minaret in the city of Ér too, which is 23 meters high and once belonged to a mosque. Pécs is also famous for its Ottoman monuments. Under the occupation by the Turks, churches in the city were rebuilt as mosques. Two of them are still standing. The one in the main square of the city is a working Roman Catholic church again, while the other one is a museum with its tower, the minaret, being a memento of the city's Muslim heritage. Famous Turkish baths from the 16th, 18th centuries, also known as hammams, are still in operation in the capital city. Budapest's Rudas, Király, Rácz and Velibej thermal baths are especially popular with locals and tourists. Similarly popular is the northernmost historical Muslim sacred place, the Türbe of Gül Baba, a dervish monk who served in the Ottoman army during the occupation of Buda. The tomb is located on a hill in Buda named after him, embraced by a beautiful garden. The Baroque style flourished across Europe in the 17th and 18th centuries, and it was strongly connected to the Roman Catholic Counter-Reformation and Revival movement. Literally meaning pearl in Portuguese, the main goal of the Baroque was to shine and to achieve a sense of awe, using contrast, movement, exuberant detail, deep color, grandeur and surprise. Baroque architecture used large central spaces, domes, lavishly decorated facades and internal walls. with paintings of ancient gods and heroes, Christian angels and saints, as well as stuccos, statues and columns. Typical buildings from this era are glamorous palaces and grandiose churches, as well as richly decorated civic houses and public monuments. The majestic Esterházy Palace in Fertőd is one of the most significant monuments in Hungary. Thanks to its design and French garden, it is also called the Hungarian Versailles. The current U-shaped building once used to be a hunting mansion, but Prince Miklós Esterházy the Magnificent ordered that it be rebuilt in a glamorous style. The building has 126 rooms, of which the most decorated are the Apollo Room and the so-called Sala Terrana. The Festetics Palace in Keszthely is another magnificent Baroque building, the second largest of its kind in Hungary. The palace complex is famous for its amazing library and the English and French gardens. The Baroque Graciakovic Palace of Godola, built in the 18th century, is a pearl of Hungarian architecture that later became a residence of the imperial and royal couple, Franz Joseph and his wife Elizabeth, also known as Sissi. Buda Castle streets and houses have a predominantly Baroque outlook. The new design of the royal palace too was influenced by this style after the Christian liberation. The Minaret Church on Eger's Dobo Square is another fine example of great Baroque architecture. It is one of the most magnificent churches of Hungary, surrounded by numerous picturesque Baroque houses and palaces. Győr is also famous for its historical cityscape, the narrow, parallel streets, beautiful Baroque churches, such as the two-towered Benedictine Church and the Carmelite Church, and also its civic houses. Most of these residential buildings have a closed balcony on their corner, which too adds a unique charm to the city's Baroque character. The Roman Catholic Cathedral of Győr was originally built in the 11th century. Even though the basilica preserved Romanesque and Gothic elements too, its character is predominantly Baroque. Likewise, most of the old civic and noble residences of Sopron reflect the style of Baroque nowadays. Some of them serve as museums, such as the Storno, the Fabricius and the Lochner houses. The richly decorated St. George Church is a gem of sacral architecture from the Baroque era. Székesfehérvár is also a good example of city centers redesigned in Baroque style. The most important historical buildings of the city center were built after the liberation by the Christians, following the new European taste in architecture and art. The Bishop's Palace and the new Cathedral, as well as the Franciscan Church, are the finest examples. Similarly to the previous examples, Baroque predominates the cityscape in Veszprém, where the most striking monuments of the city can be found within the fortifications of the Castle Hill. The Archbishop's Palace and the Baroque Holy Trinity column shows us the glory of the 18th century city.